had a smear test before the first lockdown. Not like my friend had to have one during the lockdown. She had awful trouble getting her fanny at the right angle for the Zoom meeting. And she had, as she told me, she'd let herself flourish down there. That's her words, not mine. She'd let herself flourish. She said in order for them to see anything at all, she had to use a couple of scrunchies. I was very lucky. I had mine before the first lockdown. Give me a woo if you've had a smear test in the last 3 years. All very proud of ourselves, as should be. It's very important. I made an appointment at the doctor's, went along to the doctor's surgery, went into the nurse's room. She pulled the curtain round, told me to get undressed. All very normal so far. I took off my trainers, my socks, my jeans, my knickers. There was a flicker of a second where I forgot where I was. I was quite tired that day. And I also took off my top and my bra. And I thought, I'm going to have to really quickly put these back on again, or she's going to whip this curtain back and think it's a date. But as I was putting my top and my bra back on, she shouted over the top of the curtain, "What size speculum are you?" And I thought, am I supposed to know that? I've got a horrible feeling it's one of my security questions at the bank. So I never know the answers to them either. I think we're all fairly worldly wise in this room here tonight, but if anybody genuinely doesn't know what a speculum is, the best way I could describe it to you, it's basically a car jack, but for fannies. It's very much that bit. It's not the bit where they go in with a spoon. It's not a spoon, is it? She asked me what size spoon I was. I'd be like, I'd like to think a table, but I've got a horrible feeling I'm a ladle. I didn't know what size speculum I was. I texted my husband because I thought he's been down there a bit. He might have an idea. He just sent back a picture of 3 of his fingers. Or 2 if you're a Polish handyman. But after the smear test was over, I went into the reception area. The lady on reception, as soon as she saw me approach, she said, "Well done." And I thought that was lovely. And I said as much. I said, "Thanks so much for saying that." I said, we all worry about these appointments, but they're over in seconds. They're only really a bit uncomfortable, and they're so important. But I said, I was worried about it, but I'm glad I've been. Thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot to me. She said, "What do you think I said?" I said, "You said, well done." She said, "I said, all done." Ah, shit! So I picked up my lolly and my sticker and I fucked off.